Fighting game stories have a reputation for being, bad. And as much as I love the lore of games like Soulcalibur and Tekken, I'll admit that storytelling hasn't historically been the genre's strong suit. But to understand why that is, we need to look at how story modes work in fighting games. Most fighting game stories fall into one of two categories. The first is the classic arcade style. You pick a character, you punch a bunch of random dudes and sometimes a car, you punch the final boss, and then you're rewarded with an ending cutscene. This is the simplest, easiest approach, but it's also very limiting. You can't really have character arcs or plot twists or any of the other things that make a good story because you're limited to just one scene. As time has gone on, fighting games have found lots of ways to inject more story into arcade-style modes, such as prologues and cutscene intermissions. But they're just that, intermissions. The actual fights are still unrelated filler used to space out story moments. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. These are fighting games after all, and people play fighting games to fight. This kind of story mode gets the job done, especially in games about fighting tournaments. But if you have a truly great story that you want to tell, this really isn't the medium for it. So that brings us to the second category, cinematic story modes. These basically play out like movies, but when a fight's about to happen, it transitions to gameplay and you punch a dude for a while. Unless you're playing Guilty Gear. Oh, I'm sorry, did you expect to play this video game? This is how stories work in most other genres, and it gives the writers a lot more creative freedom. The fights themselves are still largely inconsequential, but you have context for what's happening. The fights happen in the story rather than around it. However, cinematic story modes are a lot more expensive and time-consuming to create, so not every character can have one. Games with cinematic story modes generally have one overarching story instead of many separate character stories. That means your main might be relegated to a super minor role, or worse, left out entirely. Want to know what's happening with Raphael or Cervantes in Soulcalibur V? Better buy an art book. Another issue with this format is that the plot needs to constantly come up with reasons for dudes to punch each other. Any fighting game story will require you to suspend your disbelief a little bit, but it can get distracting when otherwise rational human beings decide to throw hands every 5 minutes. Guys, my sister is trying to tear a whole new universe. We do not have time for this. So what's the solution? If you're NetherRealm, you just include both types of story mode, which, yeah, that works well enough. But if you're Project Soul, you do this. To the uninitiated, this just looks like a page from a history textbook. But within these timelines is what I consider the best storytelling in the history of fighting games. To be clear, though I love the actual plot and writing of these stories, that's not what we're talking about today. This is specifically about the vehicle by which those stories are communicated. In other words, how the story mode functions. I think the effectiveness of Soul Chronicles comes down to 3 main points. Number 1, the format of every Soul Chronicle is unique. Unlike arcade-style story modes, Soul Chronicles aren't beholden to a certain number of fights or a single final boss. Everything is catered to the needs of the narrative. Some have as many as 13 episodes, and others have as few as 5. Some culminate in a climactic showdown with your nemesis, and others end with a wedding. Some have prologues, some have epilogues, some have side stories, some are told non-chronologically. Even the narration varies from chronicle to chronicle. Most just get an introductory voiceover.
Mitsurugi was a samurai who lived during Japan's Civil War period.
But the narrator sticks with Voldo for his entire story since he doesn't speak.
Voldo could have followed her, but the risk of dropping the precious box was too great.
And Sung Mina narrates her own story in first person since she's trying to establish her independence.
I'm Song Mina. I grew up in the Song Dojang run by my father.
The strangest Soul Chronicle is easily Zoslomel's, because it doesn't have any fighting. It's just him hanging out in his library and talking about lore.
In that ancient age, great change came only through war. Thus, controlling Soul Edge meant ruling the world.
I get how some could find that boring, but it makes total sense for his character. Not only is he immortal, but he's one of the few people aware of the original timeline that got rebooted by Soulcalibur VI, making him uniquely qualified to explain the ancient history of the world. Further, this knowledge of what happened to him in an alternate timeline has caused him to speedrun his character arc from Soulcaliburs 3 and 4, making him a much less violent individual. This is a perfect example of Project Soul thinking outside the box to deliver unique experiences. But even within the actual fights, there's a ton of variety. Some are one-on-one duels, and others are battles of attrition against waves of weaker opponents. Further, there are often different modifiers or win conditions based on the events of the story. Helik is unable to use Soul Charge for most of his because he's repressing his inner demon. Xianghua starts a fight with reduced health because she got stabbed in the previous scene. Seongmina even has a fight where she deals way less damage and is constantly losing health. Her goal isn't to win, it's just to survive for 40 seconds until Pro ZD can come to save the day. From a gameplay perspective, this keeps things interesting, but more importantly for this video, it intrinsically links the story and the fights. Gameplay furthers the plot rather than interrupting it. Speaking of which, number 2. Unique, story-specific dialogue happens during the fights. Cinematic story modes allow gameplay to happen within the plot, but Soul Chronicles allow the plot to happen within the gameplay. There aren't exactly any big twists or revelations that occur during gameplay segments, but simply hearing the character's thoughts and emotions goes a long way towards making the battle seem not only relevant, but necessary. A great example of this is in Cassandra's Soul Chronicle. Before battling the masked swordswoman, she gets some sort of power-up from the gods, but we don't really know what it entails. Then, during the fight, she says,
"My body's moving on its own. Is this because of that blessing?"
Also in Cassandra's story, if you use her critical edge, she says,
"I will show you the price of justice!"
In the old timeline, her nephew Patroclus said this whenever he did his critical edge, so we can infer that this is a saying he picked up from her. But even more important than what the dialogue adds is what it removes. Many characters have sarcastic or otherwise lighthearted voice lines that make plenty of sense in an out-of-context versus match, but would be super immersion-breaking in certain story scenarios. For example, Xianghua's usual taunt is a playful yawn, implying that she's bored with the fight. But when she's trying to save her boyfriend from a giant flaming skeleton monster, she instead strikes a dramatic pose and resolutely proclaims,
I won't run!
Small details like this are reminders that the plot hasn't been put on pause while you're fighting. Lastly, number 3. Everyone gets a chance to shine. Soul Chronicles basically combine the best aspects of arcade-style story modes and cinematic story modes. Like the former, every character gets an individual storyline. But like the latter, those storylines are deep, complex, and most of all, long. Like, really, really long. Setsuka's Soul Chronicle alone is about the size of Soulcalibur V's entire cinematic story mode. The visual novel style, which we'll discuss later, is less expensive than CG, allowing for a grander scope. Of course, quality matters more than quantity, but Soulcalibur VI nails that too. Soul Chronicles really got me to care about characters that I previously had little investment in by fleshing them out in ways an arcade ending never could. And best of all, everything is canon. In the past, character endings were always what-ifs, because the story simply slotted your chosen character into the same events as everyone else. After playing through Soulcalibur IV, you had to wait until Soulcalibur V to know what actually happened in Soulcalibur IV. But because Soul Chronicles are allowed to be unique, they're allowed to coexist. What happens in this game actually matters to the characters, and by extension, it matters to the players. But these stories do more than coexist, they actually affect one another. Some episodes or even entire chronicles are locked behind those of other characters. Once you play through enough of Setsuka's Soul Chronicle, for example, you'll be able to play through some of those same events from Mitsurugi's perspective. And if you choose to help Raphael in Libra of Soul, which is an entirely separate story mode, you'll unlock a secret epilogue for Raphael's story. These connections make the world of Soulcalibur VI feel alive. This is all without talking about the actual events of the stories, which are fun, surprising, and unbelievably fan-servicey. Seriously, there are some insanely deep cuts to obscure Soulcalibur lore in here, and look at how pretty it all is. The decision to use paintings instead of CG animation was obviously made for budgetary reasons, but I honestly prefer it this way. The few cutscenes we do get pale in comparison to this beautiful artwork. And it's all fully voice acted, in 2 languages. Of course, despite my clickbaity title, Soul Chronicle isn't perfect. The visual novel style isn't suited to action scenes, the story can get very lore-dumpy in places, and some characters were obviously given more care and attention than others. But it delivers the most engaging stories in the series' history. And my hope is that it will serve as a foundation upon which not just Soulcalibur, but all fighting games can build unique, complex, emotionally resonant tales of dudes punching each other. Maybe none of this matters. After all, fighting games live and die by their multiplayer. Tekken 8 could come out and have no story, and it would probably still sell millions. But if we just accept that fighting game stories are bad, we're never going to see innovation. Soul Chronicles deserve praise, not only as a reward for the writers and artists and programmers who brought them to life, but also as a reminder of what fighting games are capable of. Soulcalibur is easily my favorite series of all time, and Soulcalibur VI is my favorite Soulcalibur of all time, so I hope that this video was able to convey even a fraction of the love that I have for this game. And with that, I'm gonna leave this video here. A bit different than what I usually do, but inspiration just struck me for whatever reason, and I felt the need to make this video. So thank you so much for watching, I hope you enjoyed, and until next time, I bid thee farewell.
The legend will never die.
Good morrow everyone, Silvershire here, and welcome back to Palette Swap, where I rank the costumes and character designs of your favorite fighting games. And by your favorite fighting games, I mean my favorite fighting games, and by my favorite fighting games, I mean Soulcalibur. Seeing these two rosters duke it out would be great. The obvious issue is that half of the characters would have giant weapons, while the other half would be fighting with their fists.